Good morning. It's Thursday, August 11th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Corey Morgan. This is the Western Standard's daily live news, opinion, ranting, interview show. We cover a little bit of everything, even some weird and bizarre things at times. It's live. It means let's keep it interactive. Good to see you guys in the comment scroll checking in there. Ian, Tyler, and Colleen already. Make use of that. Let's make use of the live is really tough to pull off, guys. We got to schedule, folks. We got to keep it going. Recorded is so much easier. We don't want to do that. The reason for it, though, is because we can have that interaction. I don't necessarily read out every comment. I do see them all. And it does help prompt the conversation and keep things rolling, and talk with each other as well. Get questions my way or to each other. Just, again, keep it fairly civil, though. We can get upset and worked up, but we don't have to really get into those big fights. It's amazing how many fights can break out on the internet. I guess it's not that amazing anymore, but we don't need to. Let's just keep her good and have that conversation. Folks all the way from Newfoundland to, I imagine, the West Coast today, so that's excellent. All right, let's look at the daily observations while people are settling in for the show. We have the annual medical checkup day. Yeah, this is kind of pretty boring, but still, it's an important one. So, guys, swallow your modesty, lighten things up in the back there. If you're over 50, you're going to have to get that little poke around in there, but it can save you a lot of grief and catch something ahead of when it needs to be. Be polite to your doctor. Don't eat anything spicy the night before or anything like that. I'm certain they're not enjoying that examination any more than you are. Just try to get the thing go through as quickly and effectively as possible. And for the ladies, well, you guys have always had your checkups as well. But today's the day to think about it. Hey, we've got a medical system. It's backed up as it is. Earlier you want to check things out, the better you might catch something that you might need to take care of. On a lighter note, it's Play in the Sand Day. A lot of these summer ones that are coming up, it seems actually the summer observances seem to be less than a lot of the others, but a lot of them at least are heat focused, and why not? If you've got a beach nearby, you got a spot, you got a sandbox in the back even, grab a beer and sit with the kids in the back and make a sandcastle or something. I mean, sometimes the simple things, right? Just play with some dirt. There's no toy older or more traditional than laying or playing in the sand. So today is the day to do it. All right, I'm going to get on with what I'm ranting about. Well, actually, I'll just remind you the guests I got too. Yes, I've got Marcel Latouche coming on. He's been on regularly. He used to be on, you'd hear him on talk radio a lot in the past, back when talk radio was good. He's written a couple of books. He talks a lot about policy. Bureaucrats. He used to be the Public Sector Institute for Public Sector Accountability, I believe it was. So it's always a good conversation with Marcel, though. Lots of common sense. And Western Standard columnist Dave Makachuk's going to pop on. We're going to talk about a few of his recent columns and some of the stuff going on. All right, let's talk about some of the other stuff. So whether we like it or not, alternative media outlets like ours are heavily dependent upon the social media giants. It's just the way it is. It's pretty tough to share news stories and gain subscribers without being on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and other sites like that. When those prime social media platforms decide to take a political slant, though, as they have, it impacts the sharing of information and public thinking on a large scale. It has to be taken seriously. Now, Elon Musk saw this and really shook up Twitter when he made his takeover bid. Twitter was heavily left-leaning and been using tools such as shadow banning or even simply banning accounts in order to suppress conservative views. The indignance displayed, by the senior Twitter staff when Musk was doing his purchase and it was pending proved just how bad it had gotten, how entitled those people in Twitter felt their organization was to be a gatekeeper of information. Now, Musk wasn't calling for swinging Twitter to the right. He just wanted to open it up as a free speech platform. Twitter started backing off as it looked like Musk's purchase was going to go through. Suddenly, notable conservative Twitter account holders saw spikes in follower growth as the shadow banning ended. And some unfairly banned accounts actually were reinstated. Since Musk's deal fell through, though, Twitter's returned to its censorship with a vengeance. There's been notable conservative personalities being banned daily now for rather minor infractions, if indeed there were infractions at all. And follower growth, again, has flatlined for conservative accounts as shadow banning's returned. I should let you know, shadow banning, it's a practice where Twitter doesn't actually ban a person or an account, but the algorithms are set to ensure the tweets aren't actually seen by other people in the scroll. It's a real insidious way to censor, and Twitter doesn't deny that they do it. They never did deny it. Now, verification, it's another thing. It's important. It's a tool they use to pick and choose accounts they like. And it's an important thing in the world of social media accounts. That little blue check mark does ensure a person or organization behind the account is real. And it makes it easier for a site to gain followers as people are more likely to click posts shared by verified accounts. Now, unfortunately, the issuing of those is arbitrary and slanted. I mean, the Western Standard's been in full operation for nearly 3 years now. We get well over 1 million reads a month on our site, and it's become an established Canadian independent media outlet. We're recognized by press galleries and even Canada's Weird Media Regulatory Committee. Despite that, though, the Standard's been consistently refused verification on Twitter. They never state why. They don't care. They don't have to. Now, Twitter has actually suspended the Western Standard Twitter account because of 2 news stories we published. One was about how Denmark's banned vaccinations for children. It's just a news story. That's what they did. We're not saying if it's good, bad. That's what we posted. And another was by Chris Oldcorn on how Saskatchewan Social Services have been vaccinating some children without parental consent. Again, not saying whether it's a good or bad thing. It's just news reporting on things that have happened. It wasn't opinion. We didn't take a side. It wasn't enough, though. Twitter took issue, I guess, with any coverage of those stories and suspended our account. The suspension's been appealed, but to date, there's been no action. We're not back on there yet. So we lose reach to over, I believe it was 15,000 people. YouTube suspended us for my having an interview with one of our reporters, Matthew Horwood. He'd been doing a story on vaccine injuries. Again, it wasn't opinion. He was just reporting news. The good news is that when YouTube suspended us, the interview I'd had with Matthew Horwood went viral on Facebook, and I think it had over 100,000 views. We wouldn't have gotten that many had YouTube not suspended us in the first place. So it's a bit of a backwards effect with that. And likewise, our Twitter suspension has led to those 2 stories that we were booted off for being the top stories on our site for the last couple of days. The censorship's having the opposite effect. That said, though, we can't celebrate this. Segments of our audience now don't know or understand why we suddenly stopped posting, and we're losing some of our reach. We could also find ourselves arbitrarily suspended from other platforms at any time. Now, independent media is so important today, and mainstream outlets have been compromised through government subsidies and efforts to censor their competition. If social media platforms keep banning alternative media outlets, we can be in some serious trouble. Now, this is a tough nut to crack. I mean, while they're massive social media platforms, they're still private companies. They do and should have the right to ban content and whatever they like. They're private. I don't want to see any kind of government agency stepping in to try and regulate these platforms. We need less government, not more. That said, though, there's little for realistic alternatives out there. There's Rumble and Gab and Getter, other alternative platforms, but they've been created, but they only draw basically a drop in the bucket compared to the heavyweights out there. We need more competition in the social media world, but those ventures require billions in capital to have a hope in succeeding against the existing heavyweights. And Musk is probably not going to dip his feet back into those waters again. I like to think in time it'll settle down. People will seek information through alternative means, and the social media giants will either split up and be more competitive or at least be forced to relent. How long that's going to take, though, is anybody's guess. In the meantime, make sure to save locations for your favorite media outlets and seek them out when they suddenly go silent on social media platforms. Chances are they were banned for reporting on something that the heavyweights didn't like. We can beat the social media censorship, but it's going to be up to us. And, just keep being loyal, guys, and keep subscribing. We don't have to be stuck with them. And that's what's got me going today, guys. All right, let's check in and see what else is happening out in the news there with our news editor, Dave Naylor. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Corey. Hey, thanks a lot. You're causing me more trouble today.
What did I do this time?
Well, my mom wants a coffee mug of Liberal Tears.
Well, she should get one. I mean, these are beautiful. Go to
They are spectacular. So where do I go? And I got a coupon for 10% off, don't I?
You do. If you go to resistancecoffee.com/triggered, you will get that extra 10% off on that. It's a good deal.
Okay, Mom, if you're watching, I'll order it up today, and it'll be in the mail for you. Yeah, news stories at the moment, Corey. You'll remember on Tuesday night we held the Western Standard UCP frontrunners debate. Absent from the stage was Todd Loewen, even though he did come to the debate and was recognized and received a warm round of applause. Well, he's taken the questions that we asked the 3 top candidates, and he has answered them on his Facebook account. So good for him, and we've got a story up on that at the moment. Matthew Horwood, our parliamentary bureau chief, has got a story on Leslyn Lewis, the CPC leadership candidate, who says Tamara Lich is a political prisoner and meets the definition of such. She's been arrested and rearrested and spent more time in jail than a lot of murderers have. So Leslyn Lewis pitches in on that. We've got the Alberta NDP are holding a press conference as we speak to demand the resignation of the status of women's minister and secretary. You remember they, for some reason, selected a winning essay from an Alberta would-be politician that was quote-unquote fascist, and they are demanding heads roll there. And the health boss in Ontario says she will not rule out using some form of privatization in a bid to get the hospital crisis in Ontario under some control. And the cancel culture has turned their sights on Alexander Graham Bell. They are looking at all the nice things and monuments that we have previously honored Mr. Bell for, and they're looking at renaming them, removing them, all sorts of things that the woke culture does. And I'm not going to give away details too much, Corey, but our Jonathan Bradley has a national exclusive that'll be coming up around 2 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. It's a good one, to say the least. So I encourage all the viewers to check back around 2 o'clock for Jonathan's exclusive.
Right on. Yeah, I know that's a big one. I'm looking forward to seeing how that all comes out as well. So, well, thanks for the updates and looking forward to those stories. I'll talk to you after the show, and I hope you get on being a good son. I think you should round up one of these mugs somehow yourself and get that to your mom. But, you know,
that's what I'm doing. I'm doing the Google search for Resistance Coffee as soon as I'm done with you, Corey.
Right on, Dave. Okay, thanks. I'll see you after the show.
Take care.
All right, that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And as we can see, lots of stories coming out. And yeah, we do have a big one breaking this afternoon. I'm not trying to be a pain or anything with, teasing on it or anything like that. But again, I mean, it's an indication of why we do real news here, guys. That's what this is about. So right now, Jonathan Bradley is, of course, he's giving a chance for people involved in that story to respond. There's been phone calls out. We're verifying and confirming things to make sure that story is as complete as possible before we release it at 2 o'clock, because it's a big one. So, you know, these things are important. We don't just grab it and throw it up there, even though it feels like we do at times. No, it takes a lot of careful work, and Dave manages that as a news editor, of course, to make sure we do give solid content out there. So that, you know, might as well get into that plug to remind you guys the reason we can beat the traditional media, even beat the censorship, get straight to the Western Standard site. Take out a subscription, westernstandard.news/membership. Thousands already have. That's how we're employing all these reporters. That's how we get the resources to do this. And if you haven't already, guys, please do. It's $10 a month, $99 for a year. And like I like to always put on, I'm not begging. I'm selling a product here. We're talking about giving you guys good news content every day, you know, not controlled by government, not censored, and quality stuff. You know, that's the important part. We really are putting out real news stuff. We're not just cut and pasting press releases into stories and things like that. So if you haven't subscribed already, guys, come on, get on board. It's less than a lot of monthly services you can get online, and well worth it. So, you know, Paradoxy, just looking at some of the user comments, you know, saying, so what do I do? And I know it's hard. I don't have a good answer on how to deal with the large social media heavyweights and getting around it. Like, I know that keep your options open so you can keep looking. I just want to let people know if it suddenly disappears, have a look. That was the frustration with YouTube. When we got suspended with them, they don't tell anybody. When you go to the YouTube channel, it doesn't say this site has been suspended. All it does is blocks us from being able to post anything on there. So people going there just think we stopped. They don't realize why we stopped. And it really causes a lot of damage. And he's saying, you know, do I watch on Rumble, you know, to support other than YouTube, or watch on YouTube to send the message we demand less censorship? Yeah, I know it's tough. And Rumble, I would push more people towards it. And I know some people are watching on it now, and I really appreciate that, because that's one that doesn't ban, at least. The problem with Rumble is that it doesn't integrate right with our streaming software. Again, the smaller ones versus the bigger ones. I'm just explaining ourselves. So I can't see the Rumble comments, unfortunately. I mean, we see them on Rumble, and I have to kind of open a separate window for it. But with this, I can see the YouTube and the Facebook and the LinkedIn comments. They all come on a scroll, so I can respond to them. Again, hopefully these alternative services start getting better, and we start getting more out there, and we can bypass this censorship, because it's nuts. Yeah, there we go. Saying, yeah, I love Corey, but watching him twice a day, yeah, no, there's only so much a person can take. I appreciate you like watching me once a day, though. But yeah, I mean, I just listening to their own voices in my head, I understand it can get pretty old. My poor wife, and what she has to deal with. Let's see what else we got going on out here in the comments. Yeah, Well, that's a good point from Jet Gorgon. She's saying, I got the annual Western Standards subscription because my bank charges too much for the monthly transactions. Depends on your plan and everything. And yeah, if you do it for a year or two, if you got enough faith to want to have full access to all our news content for a year, you do save some money. Because it's $99 for a year versus $10 a month, and you'll save on those service charges from all those things. Was that Rosanna Wyman saying, I'll never have Twitter. Too many people says it sucks. Twitter is I like playing on there a lot. And it's a valuable tool, but a person has to look at it for what it is. It's a tool. It's not a good place for discussion. And I get people worked up on there all the time. If people do follow my Twitter account, they know it. I like, lobbing a turd into the punch bowl and getting them all worked up. But the trick to Twitter, don't respond to them. It's not a place for debate. If you want debate, you need a different platform where you can have a little more nuanced discussion, not in little bits back and forth like that. So don't engage them. And if you whether you want to ignore them or if they're really bad, just block like crazy. Blocking isn't censorship, guys. Blocking is saying you have the right to say whatever the hell you like. You're just not going to say it directly to me. And that way you can reach out to a lot more people, and it's an area where you can spread that news. As I said, it's a valuable tool for us. So, when I used to have my blog, for example, and I write a column on that, because I don't see all the numbers necessarily with the Standard, but I know it's similar. I write a blog post, I'll get a few hundred people read it, a regular one there. I throw it out on my Twitter account, and I got 30,000 followers or whatever. Suddenly my blog post will get a couple thousand reads or a few thousand. It's very important to amplify the bigger story. Twitter's no good for writing the whole story or anything like that at all, but it is a good tool for getting the news copy out there. And unfortunately, when we get blocked like we did with Twitter, suspended for a week, it's going to handicap us for some of our traffic. People are finding us anyway. As I said, those stories have been actually shooting up in the scroll. They've been busier thanks to Twitter's banning of us like that rather than slowing us down. But there are some people on there just think, oh, what the hell? The Standard hasn't posted. That might be the only place they look for our stories to come up. It's frustrating. All I can suggest is just if things suddenly vanish, just keep your eyes open. Chances are perhaps it's been shadow banned or even outright suspended for a little while. I see my guest in the lobby there, the first one, though. I'm going to bring him in and we'll have a conversation. This is Mr. Marcel Latouche. He's a little bit backlit there today. So
I know.
Well, we can see a silhouette anyways, Marcel. We know you're a very handsome man and typically look better, but as long as we can hear you, that's the most important part.
Let me try and change it a little bit.
Okay. That'll probably help. Yeah, there's the things that we're going live and so on. Again, Marcel's more an author than a online personality, so he doesn't have it. That's a little bit better. We can see
a little bit better.
We got some definition there, and we can see that there is a face on there. Good to see you, Marcel. It's been a little while. I appreciate you coming on today.
Great to see you, Corey. As I said, now that I'm retired, I'm in a different setting, so the backlighting is a little bit awkward, but glad to be with you. Today is going to be an interesting conversation because I understand you may be leaving your position and we may not be talking very soon in the future. So let me say, whatever I'm going to say today and I'm going to talk about today is all my own personal point of view. And I'm going to make some comments that is going to maybe irritate some people. But at this stage of my life, I think I have an opinion and I think I'm going to share it with you. You may like or may not like it. That's fine by me.
Hey, we're not here to always agree about everything all the time by any means. It's a place to share outlooks and opinions back and forth, of course, and discuss those things. And we're at a big political turning point, I think. We've got conservative parties on the federal and provincial levels, both in very important races, and theoretically, either of those people winning those races could be as very powerful politicians. Do we want to start kind of on the provincial front?
Well, I'll start with something else, actually.
Sure.
I think people have got to realize that the whole world is in turmoil right now. You've got the war in Russia and Ukraine. You have the pandemic. You've got all sorts of things going on in the United States, whether it's constitutional or not, going after Trump. But what I've got to say is that I believe the world is at a turning point where we have a bunch of socialists, I don't even call them liberals anymore, that have taken over and are trying to change our world. And I put this very much so on the conservative movement, which has not been strong enough to deliver their message, and instead have been fighting each other to find a place to deliver the message. So let's start with what's happening in Canada. A lot of Canadians have taken freedom for granted in Canada. And what is happening is that you have an autocratic government supported by a minority socialist party who is now imposing things on us and is taking our freedoms. And the media, which is owned virtually by the government today, is not sharing the right information. And the majority of people in this country are not aware of what is going on around them. And this is why the two leaders' choice, both at the federal and the provincial level in Alberta, are so much important, because we are entering an era where if conservatives don't take power, we are not going to see ourselves ever again in a free society. And we are approaching what Orwell called 1984 dystopian society.
It really is coming into that, and that's a little of what I was talking about in this sense with the social media platforms, for example. I mean, they started as a great way for us to communicate and organize and share ideas, but now they're starting to become the censors. And then we've got a government with Bill C-11, C-18. They're looking to actually control those social media platforms. And then when you've got control of information, you have control of everybody. I mean, it's such a fundamental right to be able to communicate and share information. And that's why authoritarians so regularly go after that.
And what this is why it is so important for conservatives to choose the right leaders at both levels, the federal and the provincial. I will start with the federal. We have somebody who's been in politics for a number of years, and in my view, is the only person who can challenge Trudeau with his autocratic policies. Pierre Poilievre, in my view, is the person that the Conservative Party of Canada should choose. If we wanted a liberal leader, we could have stepped with O'Toole. We don't want Jean Charest, who has been a perennial politician for so many years, and he has changed from conservative to progressive conservative, then to a liberal leader in Quebec. And people ignore the fact that these people switch and switch places to suit themselves. And Jean Charest is being, supported by somebody that I admired as a columnist, Tasha Carradine. And I think she's misleading people by saying that Jean Charest is the person to bring the conservative government in the next election. We must stop compromising on principles. We can compromise on process, but it is no longer viable for conservatives to compromise their principles to get in power. Why are conservatives so ashamed to stand up by common sense small c principles? And I think that Poilievre is the person to do so. Now, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying, I spoke with a guest the other day on that similarly. Like, we got to quit being ashamed of being conservative. We can win on a conservative platform, not always apologizing for actually being a conservative. As you said, if we wanted a liberal, well, let's vote liberal. And I brought up, Ralph Klein won clearly on a conservative platform before. Stephen Harper did it, despite what they always say. If you're unapologetic about it, you seem more honest, actually.
Yeah, and that's my point. On the provincial level, I'm going to go on a limb, because I have known Danielle Smith for over 2 decades. She was the editor of my first book, Take Back City Hall. I have known her as a columnist for the Herald. and I have contributed on a show as the former president and CEO of the Institute for Public Sector Accountability for all the time she was on QR. Many people are saying, oh, well, you know, she made a mistake, and I disagreed with her when she went from Wild Rose to support Prentice. But we must understand that she had some principles and she stood by it and she moved. The problem that I have is they accuse her of giving away the government of Alberta to Notley. Let me remind people that it was the Prentice policies that led us to a Notley government. So Danielle Smith did shift from Wild Rose to the Conservative Party. Sure, let me give you an example. People have shifted in politics their allegiances all the time. Churchill was a liberal before he became a conservative. Ronald Reagan and Trump were Democrats before they became Republicans. So let's forget about that. She made a mistake. We all make mistakes. He who is without sin should throw the first stone. There's the problem we have today. We cannot go with an establishment person in the leader of the Alberta government. I respect some of the people who are running. For instance, I have worked with Rebecca Schultz, and she's done a marvelous job as the child advocate and minister. I have a problem with Travis Toes because Rebecca got me and Madhu and Taves into a conversation about one of the most regressive taxes in this province. It is the property taxes issue. We got into a conference, the three of us, and they asked me as the Institute president to produce a paper on taxation. I did so, we produced it, we sent it to them. Taves never responded. Last week, I went to one of his breakfasts, and when I asked him that question, he says, well, we can speak about this later. There's the problem. If we get the same kind of establishment people, we won't have change. Some people are accusing Danielle of being some quack or some freaky person. But we need somebody from outside of the establishment to do so. I know her for 20 years. I want to give her another chance to do so because with the Sovereignty Act that everybody is complaining about, I don't think it is going to be enforceable. However, I think the Sovereignty Act is going to give anybody who has the power to do so in Alberta the same power that Quebec has been using in this country. We must not compromise on principles. We must put Alberta first, just like Quebec puts themselves first. And I think the Sovereignty Act is going to give us that possibility.
So I wonder about maybe to bring the discussion a little wider, because it's the same challenge conservatives always have. As I said, for example, Ralph Klein, for the older among us, remember, won in the 90s. All the pundits said, you can't be so conservative, you're going to lose. The unions went crazy, they went on strike, and guess what? He won a bigger majority. And they said, you have to quit cutting, you can't go on such a rush to balance the budget, you'll definitely lose. He won an even bigger majority. So, and then when he started to slide, when his popularity started going down, was when he opened up the spending floodgates, when he started kind of losing the fire in the belly, as his own term was about it. We got to quit listening to the pundits. We can win and be conservative. But the problem is, how do you stop the backslide? For example, Poilievre, if he becomes prime minister, is certainly going to be much better than the current prime minister. But what sort of things can be put in place to make sure the slide doesn't happen again? Because 8 years later, it might be like Mulroney in his tail end, right? And we're suddenly back to square one.
That is the problem with conservatism. When they get in power, they shift to the center. What is the center from being conservatism? Conservatives are already in the center. If you move to the so-called pundit center, you're moving to the left. And that is not what we want. The problem is, well, people start talking about tone nowadays. Look at what's happened when you talk about tone. It's not the tone that matters, it's the policy that matters. The problem is that how we deliver the message is not the tone. The tone should be very simple. I stick to my principles, and that's what I'm going to use to govern the country or the province. When you get to Ottawa, the idea that people who are in Ottawa cannot do things unless they are at the center. The question is, what is the center today? Canada is already a center kind of country. We are very open. We are very, how should I say, we acquiesce to many things. So much so, as I said to you earlier, we've gone in a way where we've taken freedom for granted. Sure, the government can sometimes control freedom and how much freedom we have based on certain issues and the circumstances. But today, we are losing many of our freedom without even the judiciary supporting the kind of freedom that we are given under the Constitution. Conservatives have got to stand up for their principles. Stop messing around with social ideas. We've got to worry about what's happening in the world. Net zero is a failed situation. The WEF is a failed organization run by elites and not by conservatives. Look, Johnson lost his seat in England. Why? He ran as a conservative and he governed as a liberal. Where was Brexit? He promised Brexit and then he didn't deliver. We must have conservatives who are going to stand for this. Compromise is not the word in 2022 for conservatives. And we must elect two leaders. I believe that this idea that Sovereignty Act is not going to work. If we get Poilievre in power, we get Smith with the Sovereignty Act working together, we don't even use it. We don't have to use it if we stick to our conservative principles. The Sovereignty Act is a good paper to start saying that we in Alberta are not going to be a doormat anymore.
So the other aspect of all of this, no matter who wins each race, is, I mean, conservatives are our own worst enemy. The first thing we do is we rip ourselves apart, and there's going to be segments. There always will in every leadership race. Some people say, well, I've had it, and they stomp out and they leave the room. I mean, the new leader of each party, again, whoever it is really going to have to reach out fast and try and pull people together before they start splitting themselves up. What sort of strategies could they do to prevent that from happening?
Very simple. Smaller government, less taxes. That is the issue. The first thing that people look at is their pocket, and their pocket is being picked by every single government. We've got to cut subsidies to government when we want to increase the economy. Stop the subsidies. Give tax credit for a number of years and remove the idea that subsidies are going to give us better economies. If you give an incentive not to pay taxes for, say, let's take a new company, especially in the high-tech industry. Why give them a subsidy? If you think they are going to be viable, give them a tax break for the first 5 years of their existence. If they move away from you within 5 years, they've got to repay all the taxes back. That's the sort of incentives you give. Because you see, if you have a company and if you don't have a company, you don't get taxes. But if you have a company and you say, okay, I'll forfeit the taxes in the first 5 years, you don't need subsidies. You didn't have anything in the first place, so you're not taking anything away from the people. Because where do you get taxes to pay for subsidies? It's from taxes. You don't need taxpayer to pay for subsidies for a growing company. You give them a tax break. These are the sort of things we've got to look at. From an economic point of view, this is the first thing we've got to do. We've got to allow industries to work. We've got to allow industries to expand. without the help of in-front money subsidies from the government.
Well, absolutely. And maybe before I let you go, we'll pivot to something you used to comment on a lot, of course, too, and that's the municipal government, because we have Calgary Economic Development. They've had a $100 million slush fund for years that they've been subsidizing businesses to try and build things up. And I mean, let's be blunt, it's been a catastrophic failure. Calgary's downtown has record vacancies. Businesses are setting up shop just outside of the city of Calgary rather than within it, even though the city's handing out money left, right, and center to incoming companies. It's a perfect example on why this subsidy idea doesn't work. But what the heck can we do in Calgary? We still got 3 years before the next election with those guys.
I mean, this is why I wrote the paper for the Alberta government to start reviewing the property taxes. Property taxes is a burden on both residential and non-residential people. What we've got to do is say in both cities here. Now, Edmonton has gone so far left that we are going to have a major problem up there. And Calgary, with this $87 billion for climate change, is a disaster. I mean, I can't believe that councillors don't open their eyes of what's happening in the world today due to the Russia invasion of Ukraine. Germany, who went net zero or are planning to close coal and so on and so forth, I mean, to meet the net zero, are going to be a serious trouble in winter. They are going to have to ration electricity, gas, and so on and so forth. Councillors in Calgary have got to wake up and not allow these climate change policies, which are utopian and are going to use taxpayers' money to get more people in government to tell us what to do. I am a conservationist. I think that we can make changes to the way we do things, but to think that taxes are going to change the climate is absolutely absurd.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, we're in some interesting times and definitely a turning point on a couple of levels. And it's very important that we do things right in this next year. I mean, I've said a lot. I think things are going to have to get worse before they get better. And it looks like we're moving into a recession now. But I mean, the only bright side that can be seen is maybe that'll motivate people to pay attention and vote for smaller, more responsible government while they can. And we can kind of reset this clock. So
absolutely. Smaller government, less taxes. That's what we need governments to be. This is why I'm going with those two people, Poiliev at the federal level and Daniel Smith at the Alberta level.
Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on to talk to us about it today, Marcel. I mean, those races are coming to a close. We'll be watching closely. And I know you like to comment a lot on Facebook and such. So, I mean, people can find you there and have more discussion and see what you're talking about as well, eh?
My pleasure. That's what I will continue doing on Facebook. I will share my views. And as I said, at the stage of my life, I mean, you know, I'm just relaxing. I'm enjoying life. But if people want to listen to me or read my stuff, please, you're welcome to do so. And I don't mind criticism. I love them.
Excellent. All right. It's always good talking to you, Marcel. Thank you very much. And we'll talk again soon.
Corey, all the best in your next endeavor.
All right. Thanks. So that was Marcel Latouche. And he's written a number of books. He's very active on social media, Facebook. He was blogging. And he managed, I believe it was the Institute for Public Sector Accountability. I could be calling it wrong, but again, Marcel's retired and he's sitting back, so he's not so hard on the direct lobbying, but he's got all of that common sense and he shares it on Facebook. Speaking of those social media platforms, like I was, you know, when I talked about areas where there's room for a little more long-form discussion, and I know Facebook has a lot of flaws, we can all agree on that, that's a better place for it. Though when people still fight on the internet, of course, but I'm just saying, see, when I'm talking about social media strategy, I guess, or communication versus others, Twitter's not a good place to try and have a conversation. Facebook, though, at least you can go back and forth. And same thing, you know, just offering my advice. If things get too heated on Facebook, if you're going too far or somebody else is, either block them or back out. Getting into those extended, protracted, longer fights just doesn't do anybody any favors. Okay, let's talk about our sponsor here while I can, and that is Resistance Coffee Company. These guys have been a great sponsor for us for quite some time. Actually, they've come back. And again, this Liberal Tears mug Dave was talking about at the start of the show. It came from them, Resistance Coffee. And these guys are. I mean, if you're tired of leftism, if you're tired of these virtue signaling companies, you buy something and you find out that inadvertently you just donated money to some extremely left-wing account or a group or something like that. You won't get that with Resistance Coffee Company. These guys do give 10% of everything to a cause, but those causes are all organizations fighting for your constitutional freedoms, like the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms and a couple other ones. And it's very transparent in the open. If you go to resistancecoffee.com, you'll see where that 10% goes. Plus, if you go visit resistancecoffee.com/triggered, you'll get 10% off your first order as well. And the coffee gets delivered right to your door. It's fresh. It really is good coffee, guys. I don't have to blow sunshine up your butts and make it up or anything. I can say with good conscience, you're getting good Western Canadian company sourced coffee that you grind up. Tastes fantastic. So check them out. And they got some really neat names. Yeah, Tree Hugger is one of them. Liberal Tears is the name of one of them. That's their medium roast. The dark roast, I think, is Black Gold or something like that. Defund the CBC. You got to love the names. And again, I mean, it's nice to be able to support a company and get a good product and not worry that your dollars are going somewhere where they shouldn't or where you don't want them to. So check them out, resistancecoffee.com. All right. This was something Dave talked about. Speaking of information, speaking of, something that's really scary when he brought up George Orwell and, 1984 and things like that. We've got historical revisionism going on. And that's a scary thing. When you rewrite the history books, I mean, you can write whatever you like. It doesn't change whatever happened. And you don't learn from it. I know it sounds like that cliche. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Well, we're doing a lot under this crazed anti-colonialism, patriarchy, racism crap. And they're actually targeting, Alexander Graham Bell. And this is the Historic Sites and Monument Board. So they're re-examining his position as a historical figure. Okay, I'm going to address something. I guess I have to here. Tomorrow morning when I open the show, I am going to have an announcement. There's some things changing at the Western Standard, and my role will be changing. And it's all good, guys. It's all good in the long run, but I'll explain at length tomorrow. Marcel sort of referenced it, so there's going to be some changes, but it's all right. I do want to explain it more in full to you guys when I talk to you tomorrow morning when I open the show. And Marcel, I guess, had heard about some changes perhaps, and it had referenced such. So we'll clarify that tomorrow, guys, and I'll stick to what's going on for now. I don't want to get folks set off, but it was a little premature before I wanted to talk at length on what's going on. And for somebody else who's concerned, the standard stats, no, the Western Standard's doing great, aside from being punted off Twitter for a week or whatever. We got great readership and a good bunch of staff, and everything's going fantastic. So, all right, I'll get back to my rant there. I just wanted to correct that before things get too concerned over there. I will talk a little more at length tomorrow about that. So either way, this federal board's reviewing Alexander Graham Bell. I mean, this was a historic man. This was one who, with that ironic name, brought about with the telephone and the invention, which was a game changer for communications. And because he had some goofy views, I guess, about sign language, and he felt that things about deaf people not marrying and stuff, it was, I guess, probably an early eugenics sort of mindset. But so what? So what? 100 and some years ago, I mean, this is from 1883, 140 years ago, this guy held some pretty wacky views. That was then. We've got to quit trying to cancel and erase historical figures because we're trying to measure them by the bar of today. It was a different world at that time. Let's celebrate the things they accomplished while realizing we've grown beyond some of the older views that they had back then. To remove somebody as historically significant as Alexander Graham Bell from our history because of some views he wrote in an essay in 1883 about deaf people, it's absurd. And even if his stuff was even more offensive than that weird stuff, like I said, they keep talking about this colonialism crap. Colonialism. Really? I mean, whatever, guys. The world has modernized. It has changed. Get over it. What are we supposed to do? I love that attitude from the extreme leftist activists all the time anyways. It really is an attitude of get back on the boat and go where you came from. Well, I can't do that. My parents were born here. So I don't have somewhere to have come from. And I'm sick of that racist BS. And it is racist when you say that this belongs to somebody's, every bit of land is their birthright because their parents were a certain color. That's working backwards. What are we supposed to do? Just all leave, let everybody go back to that 29-year life expectancy, slaughtering each other as nomadic tribes people living in a Paleolithic lifestyle? Come on, let's get realistic. It's colonialism. And these idiots who refer to themselves as settlers, they're born here. Oh, kiss my ass. Let's get real. And that language, though, is disturbing. And that gets tied in with all that crap land acknowledgement stuff, too. Yes, there were First Nations people here before me. And then there were Neanderthals before that. And there were dinosaurs. I don't care. I don't have to state that every time I start something. I appreciate they were here. Good for them. And their descendants are still here today. Now let's all work together and live together instead of being hung up on who the hell was here 500 years ago. But we can't. We got this gross, revisionism going on. I mean, really, was it that much better 1,000 years ago? Were they living in some sort of Eden-like paradise here? No, it was different. Did the new explorers and settlers do everything right when they showed up? No, there were some terrible atrocities. First Nations people were shoved around. They were pushed off land that they traditionally occupied. It happens. Let's see Scotland and, the UK go after Italy for what Hadrian did. Like, guys, how far back do you want to go? We're here today now, and we're not getting any better for being stupidly hung up on all of this past stuff that we can't change. And it's a bizarre, backwards thing. And the irony of it, that these self-declared anti-racist, anti-fascist people are acting exactly like the kind of racists and fascists they talk about, and they don't even realize it. And it's a destructive thing. It's dividing populations on race. And it's actually talking about putting, people into different zones because of race. I mean, the reserve system, that's what I want to see. I do want to see some good discussions about the reserve system. We don't have enough about it. Because I tell you what, people wonder, and I'm going to have a panel next week again on the Indian residential schools with some of those professors and that. It's not anti-First Nations by any means. We need frank discussion. And when I was working in the oil field for 20 years, I worked in the north and on a lot of reserves all over Western Canada for years and years. And they're getting worse and worse and worse every year. The conditions are terrible. And it doesn't matter because we're spending more and more and more every year. If we were spending more and it actually worked out and they were living well, fine, I could get over it. But we're spending more and they're living in misery. They're socioeconomic basket cases on those reserves. Your chances of graduating high school or getting a good job if you grow up in a reserve are terribly low. Your chances of being convicted of a crime are extremely high. It's, by every measure, the life expectancy on First Nation reserves is lower. Why? Well, because we've got a population we've segregated based on race. We've separated them from the rest of the modern world, apologized to them the second they fell out of their mother's loins, and told them that everything in the world that happens is bad to you is not your own fault. And here, have a welfare check, sit around and just exist until you die of old age, if you make it to old age. I mean, what is the future for the reserves? What do people envision? What are these little zoos of people that we want to try and keep a traditional isolated population somewhere? To feel good about ourselves? How does that make you feel good? And they are not, of course, of the old traditions. They're not living off the land, at least in a subsistence way. There's lots of tradition and lots of hunting and trapping, and there's still a lot of First Nations people greatly embracing their cultural heritage. But lots of people can go to Chinatown in a city and see how the Chinese can still be strongly tied to their culture while living on the other side of the planet from where they came from in the first place. We can maintain these things without separating everybody based on race like that. When are we going to accept that it's not working? And it's not working well for them. But we aren't even allowed to have that conversation. And I tell you what, and I'm going to keep using that word because it drives lefties nuts. But if you look at the reserve system in Canada, there's only one word to describe it. It's apartheid. We've frowned on it in every other part of the planet, thankfully, and properly. The South African apartheid was terrible. Yet somehow we look at separation of people based on race as a good thing now. Talk about the upside down world. But progressivism and common sense are not things that tend to go together very often. All right, let's see here. I'm just going to pull something up, and we're going to get to our next guest. This is Mr. Dave Makachuk, who comes on quite regularly. He's a very prolific contributor to the Western Standard in the Opinion Zone. How's it going, Dave?
Going great. It's going awesome.
Right on. So how's Bert doing these days?
Bert's okay. He's sleeping at the moment. He doesn't want to be disturbed. I thought he
Yes.
would take part, but no, he's it's afternoon nap time apparently.
Well, they've got an important schedule to keep.
Yes. But thanks for asking.
Oh, no problem. It's important. I mean, this is the furry fellow that monitors the leadership debates and gives it's an important.
He does. He has an interest in politics. I'm quite surprised. For a mackerel tabby, quite knowledgeable in Alberta politics. It's quite interesting.
Right on. So maybe we'll just kind of start through some of your more recent columns. This was quite a headline that you had from the one the other day there with destitution, poverty, and death on a prairie train to nowhere.
Yes, well, it all started when I went to a family function and had a bit too much bourbon, and I had a really strong, vivid dream about Alberta of the future, where there was like this train full of farm implements and tractors and all kinds of machinery, and it was a wintry scene, and everywhere I looked on that train, in every nook and cranny, there was someone huddled trying to stay warm, and it was so vivid and so real, and it struck me. It just really struck me that I know that it's just a dream, but I really wondered where our country was going. And in part with that, I have to mention, this week, I went downstairs to our condo to dump our garbage in the dumpster. And sitting in the dumpster was what looked to me was like a brand new child car seat, a high end one, like worth hundreds of dollars. And I thought, my God, how could somebody throw this out? So I got a broom handle from downstairs and I wangled this thing out and I pulled it out. And dear God, this thing, I inspected it. It was mint condition. It even had the manual in English and French, 2 manuals. And it had the warranty papers and a brand new rain cover in a package which had never been used. It was brand new. It still had the original packaging. And I thought, well, I can't, how can someone throw this out? Someone out there, a new immigrant or a new immigrant family can have this. And so I went to Goodwill, and Goodwill said, nope, sorry, can't take it. Insurance reasons. We can't take a child car seat because we can't inspect it. It's insurance reasons, we can't touch it. So I thought, what am I going to do? So I went home. I went on Facebook. Where you can sell things. I can't remember
Marketplace.
Yeah, Marketplace. And I placed it on Marketplace, and within 5 minutes, I had takers because I offered it for free. And to my pleasure, absolute pleasure, an immigrant family said, look, we really need this. We really need this. Can we please have it? And I didn't have the heart to say no. So I said, if you can come here in an hour, it's yours. And they came, and the man came, and he said he was new to Canada and he really appreciated it, and he shook my hand. And I thought, and that hit me. That really hit me hard, how people are really struggling to get by, especially young couples today, and immigrants, and how we have to try and help when we can. And this whole thing and it all came into one big tornado where I wondered where we were going with the Trudeau government. And of course, it's easy to bash Justin. He turned his back on us in the oil patch. He's turned his back on the agricultural industry, and it all swirled into the bonus given to the Alberta's chief medical officer, which I thought was absolutely insane, ridiculous, outrageous, out of touch with what's going on, with what we're having to do with the cost of living and what we're all struggling with. We're all struggling to get by on less and less and less while prices go up. And they gave this woman a bonus, which put her over $500,000. Like, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? Have they completely lost touch with the voters, with the people of Alberta, after all we suffered during COVID? And so all that swirled into one big tornado, and that's how the column ended up, kind of. If that makes sense.
What I appreciate is a good, personal viewpoint experience. I mean, you get lots of rage writing out of people like me on the Western Standard or all sorts of political stuff, but we like to have a wide spread of a lot of things out there to discuss and make observations, and they can still tie into politics. As you said, it also at the same time, when you realize there's some people having a really hard time right now, and it is odious. I mean, Dr. Hinshaw, fine, you're a doctor, you're in a senior position. That's why your base salary was already over $250,000. Fine. But that means you're expected to go a bit above and beyond. Your job's not supposed to be easy. So yes, she had a hard couple of years. Oh, here, let's give you a couple $100,000 bonus, a bonus bigger than the vast majority of us even make in a year.
Insane. And I had to use that story, which my buddy Reg often tells me about Punch Emlich and Johnny Bauer, where Johnny Bauer had this great night with the Leafs, and he saved 30 plus saves, and he brought home the win. And a reporter, of course, we're all looking for good quotes, right? We're all fishing for good quotes. So he fed this to Punch Emlich. He said, "Okay, would you like to say something about Johnny's performance tonight?" And Punch Emlich said, "Yeah, I'll say something. He's paid to stop the puck." So the same with our chief medical officer. She's paid to do her job. She was not an expert in emergency services or all these small business or the power grid or all these other sectors. She was no expert in that, and the impact she had with her opinions on COVID impacted everybody and everything in the province, and she had no expertise in that. And that's why I thought it was insane to give her a bonus, because she caused more havoc in a good, she meant well. She absolutely meant well. And I don't have any hard feelings against her or anything. But I just thought this was absolutely absurd and out of touch. This just shows how out of touch government is with the common man. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Well, there is a very bad growing let them eat cake attitude coming from a lot of our politicians and senior civil servants. I mean, likewise with Justin Trudeau jetting off to Costa Rica. I mean, I wrote on that where, let's remember, they put $11 million in renos into the cottage he gets for free on a lakeside with acres to play on. But that's not good enough. He's got to take a private jet on our dime and fly to Costa Rica for 2 weeks. And we're being told to tighten our belts. He's fortunate that it's not a few hundred years ago, or they probably would be setting something up out front, and there would be a revolution.
And this week they announced that one of the Snowbird Tudor jets crashed on landing, or I can't remember, landing or takeoff. Any case, these poor guys. I mean, our best pilots flying these ancient 60-year-old Tudor jets, for God's sake. And the Liberal government threw in a few million to try and tide them over until 2030. But dear God in heaven, they seem to be spending in places which we just what's that expression? Penny wise but in pound foolish. And there's no rhyme or reason to this government. There really isn't. And they're letting the military just fall apart. I mean, for the first time since 2013, just to bring us over to a military subject, there are no Navy ships, no Canadian Navy ships now serving with NATO forces. None. They're all aging. They're falling apart. We don't have enough sailors. They let it die. They're letting it die. And this is the first time in 9 years that's ever happened. And again, this is just across you look across everywhere. I mean, have a look wherever you look. It's just devastation. Our airports are in chaos. I mean, it's one screw up after another. It's absolutely one screw up after another, and it's disgusting. I don't know.
Yeah, well, with the state of the military too, I mean, that's been a long time in coming and growing. I mean, we're both old enough to remember the Sea Kings dropping out of the sky like shot birds, or when the government proudly announced the purchase of those old diesel submarines from the UK, old used submarines, and actually managed to kill our sailors trying to get them from the UK to here, when we're one of the few countries in the world that direly needs nuclear submarines. And this is all predates Stephen Harper. Even we can't even lay it all on Justin. This has been going on for decades, and now
That's
we are
true.
the world.
That's true. That's
A
true.
world of conflict, and we've got some terribly under-supported people we're sending into dangerous situations.
Well, and you look at AUKUS, the organization recently formed by the United States with Australia and the UK to provide submarine, the latest in submarine technology to the Australians. Notice how we were left out of it. The Ottawa tried to downplay it, but again, I think that we've lost their trust, and I hope at some point. I mean, I don't know who's going to be the next prime minister. I don't care, but dear God, let's bring in someone who can restore some faith in the military and our reputation in the world. We have to try and get back on track somehow. I think that's an important issue that we have to face down the road.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's just common sense. I mean, I don't think most of us want to become a largely militarized nation. We don't have the population to sustain a large standing army, but we also have one of the largest coastlines on the planet. We should have a good, high-tech, well-funded, well-trained, even if small, military, rather than this one that seems to be held together with duct tape and bubble gum right now.
I know. Well, and we still haven't signed the deal yet, but we are getting those F-35s, which is a good thing. We're behind. We're a bit behind everybody else, but that's okay. We're getting these F-35s, and I heard today that we are signing a deal for 3 tankers with. I think it was Airbus. I'm not sure if it was Airbus or Boeing, but we signed a deal for 3 tankers. So I guess we're getting a little more serious in that area. So that's one good thing. That's one good bit to report on the military front. Anyway, for Canada.
Yeah, it's funny, just a side note. I remember a story a little while ago talking about, I guess our military members have World War II era sidearms that they still use today. And they've been trying for decades. They've spent millions just talking about this and still haven't replaced them. And now I don't know where they'd be able to get them because we've banned importing any new sidearms into Canada right now.
Well, I know we've had it in the other direction. Well, again, I think they're just the lack of concern and lack of attention that Ottawa is giving the military. I think we've reached a new low point in our history. I'm afraid to say. I don't think Trudeau is really paying it much attention. I think he's more interested in his green policies and how these 100,000 6-figure unicorn jobs are going to appear out of nowhere, because we're all going to be driving electric cars and making huge money, thousands of middle class jobs for green technology that doesn't exist and probably won't exist for another 10, 20 years, and driving our economy into the gutter. So, I mean, that's our situation. It is, and again, it goes back to what I was saying, where the Canada of the future, and will it be able to be strong enough economically and offer jobs for your kids and our kids' children down the road? I don't know. I mean, I sometimes think we should consider all options. As Daniel Smith is saying, we should consider all options. And if autonomy is one of those options, well, let's pursue it. If we can't get it done with Ottawa, then let's have a look at maybe we can get it done ourselves, or at least approach some autonomy.
Well, let's maybe wrap things up on a positive note. There's a column you wrote a few days ago on witnessing a wedding. It was a nice story, and we're talking about, again, immigrants with high hopes and ambition, and not everything's necessarily bad.
That was probably the best wedding I've ever been to. My friend Graham, who's a marriage counselor, asked me this favor: can you come and be a witness? And he does this on a regular basis. And I said, sure. And it was just one of the nicest, probably the nicest wedding I've ever been to, because it was only a few of us. And we were at this park bench down south in Calgary, and it was so. There was a young couple filled with excitement to be here in Calgary and to be discovering, work and their future and everything. And it reminded me of when I had come to Calgary, also looking for a future, also looking for jobs and hoping that maybe I could make something of myself. And of course, I met the right lady, and we got married the same way in a park. And it struck me as that, geez, I sure hope Calgary and Alberta can still do this for the young kids in our province. And again, this is probably one of the most crucial elections coming up. Well, not yet, but the UCP leadership race is very crucial to Alberta's future. And I would ask people to really research it and try to make a choice that you think will be the best for Alberta. We need somebody strong. We need somebody to go and tackle Ottawa, not to play footsies like Notley did. We don't want that. We tried that. It didn't work. We need someone to go and take Trudeau on head to head and to play hardball. And that doesn't mean, separation or anything automatic. What we're asking for is a fair deal. That's all. And to let our industries foster instead of passing legislation that is knocking them into the ground. So, we can't trust this guy. We need someone to go in there and play tough, to play hardball. And I think personally, okay, I'm just speaking for myself, I think Daniel Smith is the only one who can do that. And I believe Bert believes that too. He's kind of soft on her.
Well, yeah, Bert's got his soft spots, that's for sure. All right, well, right on, Dave. Good talking to you. Thanks, and looking forward to your next columns. And
thank you.
We'll talk again soon.
Okay, and thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you, Corey. Good luck in the future. Take care, my friend.
All right, thanks, Dave. I'll talk to you later. All right, so that is the Western Standard's Dave Makachuk, again, a prolific columnist. And as we said, he writes columns on a number of things, everything, a lot of military things, a lot of international stuff. We have a lot of local focus, but I like also, as he's, as I said, with his personal observations, a nice story. It's got a bit of a political tie. It's still talking about looking at the future and your attitudes with a wedding in Alberta, or again, finding an old discarded child seat with realizing that there's people in need, and that we are also just spoiling our civil servants and our senior members as well. This country is not functioning the way it should. It really isn't. I mean, we get those discussions. We talk about the term I like to use. We don't hear as much as we used to, is compassionate conservatism. I think we like taking care of our neighbors. Conservatives aren't heartless. We want to make sure everybody has a good future. We don't mind stepping up and above and beyond. It's just that we want to help people who can't help themselves, not those who won't help themselves. There's a big difference between those two. And, just blanket government programs being tossed, left and right just ends up bleeding us and often gets to people that really didn't need it in the first place. So I'm going to speak briefly on another sponsor of ours, and that is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. The other way that we provide this news and stay independent, of course, is because we have sponsors. And CSSA, Canadian Shooting Sports Association, it's run by Tony Bernardo, and they are fantastic, and they have been sponsoring us for quite some time. Bottom line is, their name kind of says it. It's an association for people involved in shooting sports, whether you're a collector or target shooter, hunter, it doesn't matter. If you own firearms, you got to be a member of these guys because, for one, they provide resources just like any other association. There's links to upcoming firearms shows or, news items or groups, events, things like that. But most of all, they're pushing back. They're lobbying on your behalf against this government that is determined to take away your property. They want to steal your property. They want to take your firearms. If you don't stand up for yourself, they'll win. They'll win every time. It's up to us. That's the only people who are going to stand up for your butt. And the way to do it is to get together, take out a membership, join the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Just like Lucas there saying, yeah, CSSA hosts some great shows. Yes, so check them out, guys. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Google's kind of the easiest way to find them, but also their full website is cssa-cila.org, and be sure to take out a membership with these fellas. All right. Here's some of that other stuff with the disconnected government, some of these stories. This one's interesting. Cabinet members, they've got a multi-million-dollar motor pool. They got all their cars. They get chauffeured around. Fair enough. Senior government officials, they need security. There's things like that. But it turns out in an inquiry that they don't drive Canadian cars. I mean, there are ones made in Canada and in Ontario and a number of, manufacturers and assembly places. You'd think they'd buy them there. No, they're mostly from Kansas. This is a government that's incapable of leading by example. So they love to pour the subsidies into these auto plants and say they're so important to the whole nation that they've got to suck the tax dollars out of Alberta and pour them into these Ontario plants. But when it comes to purchasing items for themselves, for their own government, they apparently can't source Canadian stuff. I don't know, what is the padding a little fluffier for your entitled asses on the American-built stuff versus the Canadian-built stuff? How are you supposed to take these guys seriously when they say they care about Canadian jobs, yet the government can't even source local things when we had comparable products right here? Of course, you always got to wonder with these things when they make these deals, who was connected to whom and who really kind of got perhaps a little extra bonus for having purchased from certain areas rather than what's handy. Getting back to, this is a scary one. Well, not scary. It's just more of the same, right? Economic status for the French. The cabinet must consider steps to secure a foothold for French in the public realm by way of cultural, political, and economic status. This is a guide. And so staff are complaining that after 53 years of bilingualism, only 7% of the English-speaking Canadians know French words. Common sense people would say, well, if you've tried 53 years of shoving French down our throats in the English world and we still haven't embraced it, maybe you should give up. But no, this is the government. They want to double down. Well, then we got to figure out how, damn it. How are we going to make those English-speaking people speak more French? Well, they won't. Well, what they will do is bring about a lot more regulations into the private industries, because they like using federally regulated private industries. That's where they start. And making language-speaking quotas, making mandatory provision of French services. I don't care if there's French on the back of my cereal box. How long will it be before they say the Western Standard, well, it broadcasts potentially into Quebec as well, we have to have a French component as well. Hey, that stuff's not beyond the realm of possibility. And then there's another way that they can bankrupt independent media. They can say, well, if you're not going to put out that French stuff, we're pulling all your licenses and we're not letting you broadcast. This is crazy, but this is where the government's going, guys. This is where we are. This is problematic, and this is a government, again, disconnected. Here's something from the CBC, our state broadcaster. $1.5 billion a year plus. I always like to remind it, they steal a bunch of money from the advertising market too. And I use that term steal because when you're already getting pumped full of subsidies to the tune of $1.5 billion tax dollars in a year, and then you sell advertising on top of it, no other outlets can compete with that because they can undercut the ad sales because they don't need that money. That's just bonus money to hire more union French speakers. Well, their story though is saying lumber, wheat, and oil, all the prices are tumbling, and this is their headline: the worst of inflation is over. They are in damage mode. Canadians are hurting. They're having a hard time. Inflation's beating the hell out of them. A lot of it's because, again, Canada, and yes, pretty much every government opened the floodgates, started printing money to deal with the pandemic. The other part is when you lock down production and lock down supply chains, you cause shortages in items and the prices of them go up. It's government actions that cause the inflations. Quit making excuses. There's no virus has ever impacted your purchasing power. Government responses to the viruses are what impact your purchasing power. But the CBC carrying water for the Liberal government, because they know people are getting pissed off, they know they're having a hard time, they know the inflation sucks, are actually having a headline out there while we're watching the price of everything go up. They're already announcing, inflation's over, guys, don't worry about it, don't sweat it anymore. That price at the pump, that's your imagination, I mean, it sounds like now housing, it's interesting, it's really coming down, and there's some warnings. Again, this is another indication, though, of the ineptness of the government. So they've been cranking up interest rates from the central bank. That's the way they try to deal with inflation. You crank up the interest rates, Companies start cutting their capital budgets. People are less inclined to buy houses. You slow the economy down, which slows inflation, but it's also because everybody's broke. And if you overcrank it, you get a recession. You actually push the economy the other way. You push it down, and then you got a big problem. So now they're getting fearful because they think that the housing correction, and that's what Mike Thomas, our columnist who talks a lot on real estate, when I had him on last, talked about. It's a correction, probably not a bubble. But now this correction, they're warning, might be as much as 25%. When you suddenly get a slash of 25% in home equities across this country, we are going to have an economic tidal wave go across this country. I mean, there's no doubt there's been housing markets that have been overvalued and way too high. And the way to deal with that was because we had incredibly low interest rates. People were taking out mortgages that probably shouldn't have. And the Bank of Canada should have started easing these interest rates up long ago. They're going to do that. I mean, we knew it. We were talking about, I remember talking to Franco Terrazzano from the Taxpayers Federation as we were looking at the spending ramping up and up, 2 years ago when the pandemic's going, like, this is going to cause inflation. Yes, it is. Well, what's going to happen? Well, the Bank of Canada will raise interest rates. But they didn't even start until a few months ago. Like, they should have at least been easing those rates up a year ago or more. But no. And we're going to be in some big trouble, guys. And there's more and more economists using that R word. And I listened to an economist on talk radio one morning saying we need a recession. That's what needs to do it, to correct things. Wow, okay, and I need to punch myself in the balls for birth control. Guys, there's better prophylactic ways to avoid getting yourself in trouble. A recession, that's using a hammer that could have been avoided with proper economic policy. But again, we do have a prime minister who overtly says, I don't like thinking much about economic policy. Well, I know the idiot probably needs help spelling his own name. And we're in a lot of trouble. And Chrystia Freeland doesn't seem a hell of a lot brighter than him. Not looking brilliant. And meanwhile, we've got other lunatics. This was a story out. A group in Prince Edward Island, they are screaming and calling for more lockdowns. They want lockdowns back. They're in Charlottetown protesting, and it got reported on a memorial that they put up for 52 COVID-related deaths since this began. 52 over 2.5 years out of hundreds of thousands of people. And it's COVID-related. Often these were people who, I hate to say it, had one foot in the grave already. It might have taken their life a bit earlier. That's tragic. We're talking weeks, months maybe. I mean, COVID. I'm not going to get into we'll get kicked off YouTube. But either way, these are people that really think for numbers like that they should lock down the economy, that we should infringe on people's rights more. We should have more people missing funerals, missing weddings, missing graduations, losing their education, not traveling. There really are assholes who think that the government should keep doing this. They exist. And it's not just in Prince Edward Island. They're here too. And we got to stand up to them. Because, it's not hard to coax an authoritarian government to become more authoritarian. They're just looking for an excuse. They love control. They get off on it. They fetishize it. I don't like to think about what they do behind closed doors when they think about it. I got a feeling that's part of why so many of them are pissed off that the RCMP have been snooping in on their personal cell phones. I can't imagine some of the pictures on there. Things they do to themselves when they look at lockdown measures on paper. It's going to be arousing for a liberal. Either way, we'll see if that call to action gets ignored in PEI. I hope for the best for you guys way out there, guys. Here was something with Danielle Smith spoke yesterday. They've been making a lot of news. That was funny to watch. I caught a bit of that in the news last night. So she spoke in Banff at an event to a teachers union. They're all out there in Banff. And boy, if you want one of the whiniest, most entitled unions on the planet, teachers have got that one down. They're a close, the nurses are a close second, but the teachers have really got that one down. And she basically dared to say it like it is. And the part that I liked the most, though, was they actually did the TV panning when Smith was up in a panel talking to them about things like saying kids are getting socially promoted, which is true. And she's saying kids are graduating without knowing how to read and do math, which is true. They did that crap with some of that discovery math and shit like that to kids. She dared to say it. And they were just, oh, how dare you? What are you? Literally, I was surprised they didn't all have pearls they could actually clutch. The looks on their faces as somebody actually countered them and said, yes, I don't agree with you. I'm going to push back with you. And it showed their entitlement, their years of having governments terrified and kissing their collective asses. And they were shocked that somebody dared talk back to them. It's about time. It's about time. About time we talk back to all of these entitled, bloated civil service unions that have been bleeding us dry, particularly the ones that are taking care of our kids right now. And I'm not saying every teacher's bad. It's a damn hard job that only certain people can manage to do well. It's a very important job. And it's because it's so hard, because it's so important, that it shouldn't be in the realm of unions that promote incompetent boobs all the way through the teacher system to grab a big bloated pension because they just wanted to put time in to be able to have 2 months off in summer, 2 weeks at Christmas, 2 weeks at spring break, every body professional day known to man. What do they only teach for now? 30, 40 days a year? It feels like it sometimes. Those are the ones the unions protect. There's ones who out there who take it as a calling and they work their asses off and they're probably worth twice what they make. But anybody who's been through the public system, and I remember some teachers like that, they were going through the motions. These are the twits that drank their faces off through university and decided to get a degree in philosophy. And then when they got tired of making happy faces and lattes, how can I make myself a decent living? Hey, I can get straight to teaching with a guaranteed salary, all these benefits, a huge pension, all those months off, but they don't care about the teaching. They just want the compensation. That's what the union protects. I'm not saying disband the union, but let's undercut them. Let's have truly choice in education. Let's have those dollars follow the students. Let's have a variety of schools, educational institutions, because this stranglehold of public education sucks and it's not serving us. But like I said, watching the reaction of those teachers, their faces. I mean, again, watching mainstream media isn't one of my favorite things, but I got to watch the news every night to keep up. And just seeing that shot to the crowd, like they were just almost like this when Smith dared to call them out on their thing. That was just refreshing to see. Good on you. Here's another story I looked at. So this, I don't even know which one this was in. I think it was Global. 5 things experts say could ease pressures on Ontario's health system. I'll get back to why. So one is repeal Bill 124. I guess it caps his wage increases for public sector contracts to 1% a year for 3 years. And this is, of course, the nurses union is pissed off about that. Step 2 is train and hire more workers. Okay, we'll just find them and put them in there, apparently. Build standalone centers to catch up on surgical backlog. Okay, but it also makes sure that that's publicly funded, not private. Number 4, improve work conditions for staff. Well, I'm sure they didn't really have an agenda to make them worse, but okay. And implement a system to prevent staff shortages. Okay, well, what kind of system do you need? It's easy enough. When you see them lined up out the emergency door, they probably got a staff shortage. When they're closing and reducing their hours because they can't keep up, they've probably got a staff shortage. What sort of bloated bureaucratic crap do you guys want to put together to measure what we already know? And the other parts, all these solutions, we already know all that. The thing that nobody's got the balls to say is it's the system. All of these things are just talking about throwing more money into a broken system. It's not going to work. You're putting sawdust in the transmission to try and get a few more miles out of the thing. You got to change the system. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know when that common sense is going to come in for people to realize that you can't fix Canada's rigid, inflexible, inefficient, expensive healthcare system. You got to change it. We got to look to those dozens and dozens of systems that are doing far better than ours over in Europe, probably in South America, all over the place. And don't let these jerks keep polarizing it and acting as if there's only 2 systems, the American one and the Canadian one. That's absolutely untrue. It's lazy politics. It's lazy thinking. In fact, it's disingenuous. And who are the people always saying that? We don't want to go Americanize it. Well, don't then. Let's Germanize it. Let's Frenchize it. Anglicize it. I don't know what the hell it would be. There's all sorts of other ones, and they're all doing better than us. New Zealand's doing better than us. And you know what the common denominator is? They allow private care. Universal, don't forget that word, universal. Everybody's still covered, but they're allowing private care. Canada, North Korea, Cuba, the only ones that will legalize it. And look how well that's working out for us. But I don't know, things are going to have to get a lot worse before they get better. I mean, we're seeing those stories, and I was listening to Rachel Notley jumping up and down, doing her socialist dance, saying, oh, the UCP is responsible for all of this health crisis and all these care centers that are reduced hours and short of people. And up in Swan Hills, they don't have any doctors. But she's forgetting to say they got the same problem in BC, and that's run by the NDP. They got the same problem in Ontario. They got the same problem in Newfoundland. It's everywhere because it's the Canadian system. I know you're trying to win partisan points, but come on, Notley, stuff it. It's not a provincial thing. It's a national thing. But I mean, our provinces need to step up and tell the federal government to go to hell and fix the system ourselves. That gets back to a lot of what our earlier discussions were about. All right, I've ranted and raved enough. And yes, I'll open up the store and clarify and open up the show and clarify a number of things tomorrow. and announce some changes that are going to happen around here. Again, it's all for the better. It's an evolution. We're a growing independent outlet, and some things change. I'm not vanishing altogether or anything like that. And the Western Standard's certainly not in trouble. I know I'm vague booking. We'll go into the details of it tomorrow when I open the show up. So I'll also have Reed Small. We're going to talk about some of the things in BC. He's our BC reporter. He's putting out some great stories out there. And there is a race for the NDP leadership out there. And we aren't hearing much about it, but it's an important one. And Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science is going to come on, and we'll discuss a number of things during the show there as well. So thanks for tuning in today, guys. It was fun, and I'll see you all again tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.